My name's Jared Platt. For those of you who have not seen my workshops before, or you have been who don't know who I am, I come from Arizona. I am a wedding photographer principally. That's how I make most of my money. I do some senior portraits and some kids and stuff like that, but mostly weddings. Everything has people in it generally, which is funny because when I first started photography, I was in college and I studied photography in college, and I thought I was going to be Ansel Adams. Like that's what I was going to do, and I wouldn't take a picture of a person. It was against my code. And I realized there really wasn't a lot of money in being an Ansel Adams copy. And so I had to find something that I could do a career in, and I started gravitating towards people. And now pretty much everything I shoot has people in it. Even if I'm out shooting landscape, I kind of wish that I had a photo of a person in it, because to me a landscape is a good backdrop for a person. You know, so my whole mental activity has shifted from being against photographing people to only photographing people. So it's interesting how our tastes change photographically throughout our careers. But so that's me. I have a wife and 3 lovely children that are in Arizona right now. I don't know if they're watching, but if they are, hi guys. And with that, we're going to dive into this workshop. Now, those of you have you guys seen my previous workshop? Everybody in the studio? Okay, so those of you who have seen my workshop know that it was all about post-production and file management and being efficient with your time in post-production. So that's what my previous workshop was about. But there's something additional that needs to happen to be efficient in post-production, and that is you have to be efficient when you're actually shooting the images, and you have to do things correctly at the shoot in order to save time in post. And so today and tomorrow we're going to really talk a lot about the things that we can do at the photo shoot to be efficient while we're shooting, to spend the least amount of energy, the least amount of money, the least amount of time getting the images that we need, and getting them done well enough that when we get to post, there's little to no effort in post working on those images. Because if you're all over the board on your exposures and you don't shoot the image just right, then you got to go into Photoshop and you got to brighten this up and you've got to, you know, burn and dodge to try and get the image that you want. But that takes a lot of time. So our goal here in the next 2 days is to get you to the point where your images are quality enough and they're done quickly enough and efficiently at the photo shoot so that you spend little time on the photo shoot getting them, and when you're in post you spend little time working on them. So that's our goal. And then on Saturday, on the 3rd day, then we'll go into the actual post-production of the images, and we'll talk a lot about tips and tricks inside of Lightroom. We'll talk about the adjustment sliders inside of the develop module. We'll talk about specific plugins that we can use, things like that that'll help to get the image through the process. But rather than talking on a macro scale like we did in the last workshop, we're now going to talk about a micro scale. We're going to talk about each individual image. So we're going to follow the life cycle of an image from the photo shoot through post-production to the end, so that you can see how we shot it and how we adjust it for the maximum effect together. Okay? So that's our goal. And that's what our workshop is about. So the first thing that we need to talk about when we're talking about photography is light. Now, I don't want to be one of those people that says photography is about light, because that's kind of a strange statement. Photography is not about light. Photography is about people, or photography is about places, or photography is about the concepts that you're photographing. Light just happens to be the paintbrush. Okay? But you have to understand your tools in order to do a good job at shooting. So that's what we're going to talk about light for, because we want to understand the tool that we've been given, which is light. And how do we capture that? And what does it say when we use it in various ways? So we're going to talk a little bit about light right now, just as an introduction to our subject. Let me pull up my Keynote here. And just so I understand it, out in internet land, you can chime in as well. I want everybody on the internet to know that we want to be as interactive as possible with you. So please feel free to send us your questions and be very vocal about your questions. So just interject questions as you can, because we're going to be answering your questions very quickly on this. We want it to feel like you're in the studio with us while we're working. So please just send us your questions. As for my studio audience, we didn't get in the intros a good feeling of how long you've been shooting. So I really want to get a sense of that. So everybody just kind of shout out how long you've been shooting.
Professionally?
Yeah,
5 years.
5 years professionally.
2 years.
2 years?
I shot for about 12 years professionally, and then I took a long break, and I'm shooting again, so long time.
Okay.
A year and a half.
Year and a half?
2 years this week.
2 years this week. Okay, good. All right, I've been shooting 15 years professionally, and then of course while I was studying and things like that. So I've been doing it for a long time, but I started in commercial. I was a photo assistant in a commercial studio. So I learned a lot about lighting and a lot about photography just from that. You can learn a lot of stuff in college, but mostly it's artsy-fartsy stuff. You know, it's not really useful. It's great because I learned composition and I learned all these highbrow concepts, but the practice of photography is much more difficult than the artistic portion of it. I mean, in photo school, they let you do whatever you want. It's like, I meant to do that. Okay, you meant to be out of focus. Great, you know, great excuse. But in the commercial world, you don't have those excuses. And so it was a great education for me for a couple years to work in a studio where I had to get it right, and I had to learn lighting, and I shot jewelry and product and people, and so I really had to learn to get it right. So a lot of what I'm going to teach you comes from that experience. So let's talk about light then. Light is an interesting animal because it's all science, and that's light. If you want to break down light, that's what light is right there. That's a lot of science, and we know that light is just literally a wave form, right? And it's just, there's not much difference between light and radio waves, and there's not much difference between radio waves and sound waves, right? It's just all on a different spectrum. Some are going fast, some are going slow. Some are much more highly energetic and others are not. So really, it's almost like if you could expand your eyes, you could see sound, you know? But your eyes only see a certain visible wavelength, and that's what we see here. Inside, I've got this little thing broken out right here. This is the visible spectrum, and then of course you've got the infrared. Everybody likes to play around with on film and pretend to mimic that in digital. And then you've got the UV and the X-rays, and so you've got all the microwaves. This is what cooks our food, I guess. But that's the very small portion of all of this energetic waves that are bombarding us on a daily basis. This is the only portion that we can see. And as you get to one side, it gets cooler, and the other side gets warmer. And we actually say cool and warm, but they actually switch places because the stuff that's blue is actually hotter than the stuff that's yellow. So if you look at a flame, the top part of the flame is yellow, right? and the bottom part of the flame is blue or clear. Well, it's the blue light that burns you faster. Okay, so when you see blue light, that's actually a faster wavelength or a more energetic wavelength. It's hotter. But we call it cool light. It's not. It's actually warmer. So when you go outside and you change your settings on your white balance and your camera to an outdoor setting, it's expecting bluer light because it's hotter. And when you come inside and you've got those little warm Edison bulbs, right? Those are really actually quite cold. But they look, we call them warm because they're yellowish, right? And so when we talk about color balance, we're going to be talking about those issues. And we're going to try and balance those issues. But because light is so scientific, we kind of just don't think about it that way as artists because we don't think science. We failed science. I failed science. So, you know, I was no good at science. So what we want to do is we want to talk about, instead of talking about it in science, we want to talk about what it does or what it is. So, light itself is a physical thing. It's particles. And I like Ralph Waldo Emerson's quote. He says, "The world we live in is but thickened light." I thought that was an interesting quote. But everything we see around us, we see because of light, right? And without light, we couldn't photograph, right? But light also does other things besides just show us things. It speaks to us in certain ways. It denotes love and beauty, right? When we think about light, so Romeo says, "But soft, what light through yonder window breaks." So who's he talking about? He's talking about Juliet, and she's the sun, right? So when we think of light, we suddenly think of love and beauty. We also think of sadness and fear in the absence of light, right? So when we think about light, there are certain things that light is, but there are also things that light does. So when we're photographing and we're coming up with a lighting scheme for our photograph, we want to think about what light is and what it does. Two very different things. So let's go into Lightroom, and I just want to pull up a couple photographs. So I made a little collection here of some images, and we're going to play a game here, and that game is we're going to answer a question: what light is and what it does. Okay, so we look at this photograph. What does the light do in this photograph? Answers?
It's drawing your eye. It's instructing the eye where to look.
Okay. It instructs you as to where to look, right? So the light does point you this way. It points you up here. You can see these edges here. It illuminates the edges. It gives you detail in the shadows. That's what light does. What is light? What is it saying?
In that image is the subject.
It's saying, oh, right? It's calling out like angelic. This is a church, right? And so we see the church, and then we see the shafts of light coming in. It's like God is speaking down, right? And so light, you can see that when you're looking at an image, light will do one thing in the image, but it also will say something in the image. Okay? So when you think about light, you can't just think about, I need to light up this subject and I need it to look a certain way. You have to ask yourself, what does the light do to the image, but then also what does it say in the image? How does the difference between all of this vacancy and the soft kind of foggy look, all of that light, and then this dark horse down in the bottom, what does that say? So there's more to light than just, oh, I want to light it this way so that I've got enough light on this side of the face and that side of the face is filled in. That's not what we're attempting to do when we're trying to light something. We also want to say something. Okay? So, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the process of lighting things. So we're doing an in-studio shoot. In segment 2 and 3, we're going to talk about the process of putting together a photo shoot in an efficient manner, but also saying something with the light that we're producing. So that's what we're going to do in segment 2 and 3. Right now I want to talk to you about image quality, I want to talk to you about latitude, I want to talk to you about exposure and things like that so that we're ready to go into that. So think about several concepts. Quality, we're going to talk about quality, we're going to talk about lighting and how to use it to say something as well as to get quality. And then we're going to talk about the efficiency of putting together a photo shoot. That's our goal for today, or at least for this morning. And then as we come into the last portion of the day, we're going to talk about calibration. And calibration is very, very important, because without calibration, you end up spinning your wheels in post-production because you didn't calibrate things at the shoot. So you can calibrate your camera so that you know what you're getting at the shoot, so that when you get into post-production, it looks exactly the way you intended it, rather than having to fix the issues that you didn't know were happening at the shoot. Okay? So calibration is key to that process, and we'll do that in the 4th segment.